I'm Kevin Rinke, and I'd like to welcome you to Beyond the Echo. I ran for governor in Michigan. After losing that election, my desire to look at issues that are important to the state or the country grew. There is so much static. There are so many opinions. Our news stations have gotten to the point where we don't know what news is anymore. Where do you go to get real facts? This is about real perspective for you. Beyond the Echo will cut through all the smoke, all the opinions. It's not about Republicans, it's not about Democrats. It's about the issues and what are real. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Echo. It's my privilege today to have Mike Cox, candidate for governor of Michigan in the 2026 election. And this might be the first time that two ex-candidates have ever sat down and had a conversation about a future election. And I appreciate the courage that you showed by being here, Mike.
Well, I don't know if it's courage. You know, there are people, cops on the street of Detroit or folks over in wherever, you know, facing harm's way. I don't think either one of us is that deadly, so we'll see.
Well, when I say courage, I mean politicians as a rule don't like to put themselves in uncomfortable spots, and you stepped up right away, right. And I want to acknowledge that. There were a couple of other announced politicians who have failed to respond or given the two-step and the shuffle, which I find disingenuous because people need to know. This is a very unique election cycle in 26 for Michigan. It's the first time, I believe, since the 1800s that we're going to elect a senator, congressional people, a governor, right on down through the ticket. And it's critical, in my view, that Michigan gets it right. And them knowing what you're running on and what you're all about, I think is a big step.
Well, Kevin, you know, my philosophy is go anywhere, talk to anyone, even a fellow politician like yourself.
Oh, I'm no politician. I'm a citizen.
Okay. I think you ran for office before. Doesn't that make you a politician?
You know, it made me a business person that wanted to run.
You're vacillating now. That sounds like a politician to me.
There's no vacillation whatsoever.
Okay.
I think running the state of Michigan in the governor's role is a businessman's job, and less politics and more business, with budgets up in the 80 billions of dollars or hundreds of billions of dollars and lots of employees. So.
Yeah, I agree. You know, $83.5 billion, you know, a growth of 45% over the past 7 years. To me, that's an outrage. And I agree with you. We need someone with the experience who can run things. And so I've run a Department of State government. In fact, shrunk the headcount 20%. You know, as you know, so many politicians brag about doing more with less, but I've actually done it. And quite frankly, I've had the fortune of being forced to start my own business. I was just a little lowly homicide prosecutor in Detroit when I got elected the first time. So I'd never been in the private sector. In 2010, when I went home, I ran a business, and it made me that much better.
It's good. So when you were Attorney General, I believe you cut government roughly, the Attorney General's office, about 18%, maybe 20%.
Yeah, it was 20%. For those who are research nerds out there, there's an article from September of 2010, where at that point we had cut it 19%. And we were going to a new fiscal year. So I think technically it was like 21%, but I say 20, give or take.
You know, it's interesting because you don't often think of Jennifer Granholm cut government by 11,200 at the same time. And it's a coincidence that it happened to be 20%. I don't know, was that a governor's initiative that she implemented? Or did it just happen that 20% was a good number?
I don't know. I'm not aware that she cut the number.
11,200.
Hold on. Can I finish?
Sure.
Okay. I'm not aware that she cut the amount of state employees, certainly not 20%. I know that's the case. The only ones who did it were the two Republicans at the time, which was Terry Lynn Land and I. You know, we didn't have a vote in the legislature, so we had to take whatever the legislature and the governor gave us, and we both
Absolutely.
we both had to deal with that, and that's what we did. And in fact, the amount of cases in our office almost jumped, I think, 8%. We started new initiatives, a senior brigade, consumer protection increases, you know, chopped at the utility companies, reduced rates by over 3.5 billion. A lot of other great things, you know. It's like all about building the team and then leading them.
How big was the office at the time?
When I left or when it began?
Both.
Okay, so it was, I have to check my notes, but I want to say I was at 545 FTEs. And then when I left, it was about 465-ish, whatever 20% is.
What's an FTD?
Full-time employee.
I'm sorry, FTEs. I thought you said FTDs. I misheard.
No,
that.
no flower delivery. FTEs.
All right. Yeah, there's no question that government was bloated at that time. And I remember Terry doing it.
Well, it wasn't bloated in my office. You're not hearing
By
me.
the end.
In fact, the current FTEs are about 200 more than what I had. But you bring up a great issue, which is Governor Whitmer is attempting to grow the amount of employees by 5,000, right, from about 52,000 to 57 and change. And I think the Speaker of the House, Matt Hall, and his group should be lauded for fighting around that. And so we'll see that where that happens. But when I get there on January 1, 2027, the days of good, efficient government will be back.
Got it. Tell everybody about your political history. You say that you were a lowly prosecutor. Were you practicing in what county at the time? Or?
Well, I was a career public servant. So when I got out of high school, I joined the Marines and I did 3 years, was a rifleman, traveled all over the world. It was a great experience. Really, along with growing up in an immigrant family, that made me who I am today. The one thing I learned in Marine Corps boot camp, if you set your mind to it, you can do pretty much anything. And in fact, at 19, the Marines gave me the opportunity to lead 20 other Marines. And that taught me lessons that I still apply now 40 years later. And from there, I paid my way through U of M and U of M Law School and joined initially the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office. But I grew up on the west side of Detroit near Rouge Park, Redford Township area. You know, your basic neighborhood of 950 square foot homes. You know, no one in my neighborhood who went to college. And so I always wanted to go to U of M. And so when I got out of the Marines, I went there. And
From the GI Bill? My dad used the GI Bill.
Yeah,
when he
it
came
was
back.
something a little bit different. So my son's in the Navy right now. He's an officer in the Navy. First officer in the family. We're always a little suspect to him. But my oldest daughter used the GI Bill to become a nurse. And in fact, she's down in Mississippi, which kind of informs part of why I'm running today. But no, it was a different thing called the VEEP. And so we didn't get full coverage. So I was a dishwasher, a grill cook, admin clerk, all during college and law school in order to pay my way. And then Brooks Patterson hired me at the end of his administration as a prosecutor in Oakland County. But I always wanted to be in Detroit, because that's where I went to high school. And that's where I saw the most need. So in 1990, the summer of 1990, I got the opportunity to go to Detroit, was a civil servant prosecutor there. Spent a year and a half doing only child sexual assault cases. I did organized crime cases against gangs in Southwest Detroit. And ultimately, I ran the homicide unit in Wayne County's prosecutor's office. So if you can imagine it, Kevin, I had 14 or 15, it varied through the year, prosecutors who every single day, all they did was murder. And it was tough, it was challenging, but I learned a lot from those folks, and I learned a lot as a homicide prosecutor over that time. So it really prepared me for politics. It really prepared me for running the AG's office and ultimately running state government because I was in the bureaucracy and I saw what worked, what didn't. Things like quotas don't work. Inefficiency is also where I was kind of a back and forth, a Republican Democrat, right? Like a lot of people. But seeing the outcome of the Great Society and the Blanchard years beat being a Democrat out of me, right? So because I would see 4 and 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old kids when I was prosecuting child sexual assault cases from all over Detroit, and they were bright kids. And their parents wanted the best for them, but they didn't really, in their neighborhoods, they didn't really know how to get it delivered, especially Detroit public schools. And so that led me to really become a conservative and really get involved in trying to do more in school choice. And that kind of really shaped part of who the politician I am today, if I'm a politician.
Well, only you'll decide that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, but we can both say we both ran for office, right?
Absolutely.
So, okay. Yeah. And you and I both ran for governor the same amount of time. So whatever I am, I think you are too.
Well, you're entitled to your opinion. I'm sticking with, I'm a business guy. And so you worked in the prosecutor's office in Detroit after you left working in Oakland County. You went to Detroit. For
Right.
how long?
I was there a total of 13 years.
13 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably did, you lose count, but probably in excess of 150 jury trials, a couple hundred bench trials, probably at least 40 or 50 murder jury trials, somewhere in that area.
It's crazy work. It even today, and Detroit's improved in some aspects, but it's still got the 6th highest murder rate in America.
Well,
for a major city.
actually, you make a great point, but it's actually the 3rd highest in America amongst big cities. And it's really, if you think about it, it's a civic and moral shame.
Yeah.
Because, there's a guy I hear is running as an independent this year, and he's the mayor of Detroit. And yet, every city, wherever you live, or township, 60% of the budget is police and fire. So that, to me, that's kind of the ultimate judge. How are you on public safety? And the mayor of Detroit, despite hiring 30% more employees and tripling the budget, still has the 3rd highest homicide rate in the country. Put aside all the nice new buildings, it has a higher homicide rate than Flint, which doesn't have all the nice new buildings and all the new investment. But voters will have a time to weigh that.
Yeah. Well, you can argue certainly that the mayor of Detroit, his successes could be measured by what a previous Republican governor gave him the opportunity for, because I think that, and I know Mike Duggan I'm referring to, his dad was a great judge, a Republican, a conservative, and a rule of law judge. I think he and Mike had a falling out when he went to work for McNamara, but that's a story for a different day.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I do know that Governor Snyder
set Mike up pretty well.
Well, he is the real hero in the story of the Detroit turnaround. And, because Flint kind of cast a shadow on his legacy, but he was really the guy that made a difference, and he doesn't get enough credit today.
Yeah. And it saddens me because there are Republicans that like to take shots at him. Rick Snyder took a situation in Detroit and in Michigan and made tough decisions that traditional politicians would have shied away from. And I think that we were better for it. Perfect? No. But certainly better for it. So you worked 13 years in Wayne County, and then what?
Then I was elected Attorney General in the closest statewide race since World War II. In fact, I was dramatically outspent by Gary Peters. I would have to look at Gary's wiki page, but I think Gary is something like 11-1, 12-1, or something like that in elections. And I'm the one staying on his record. So I beat Gary. He outspent me. Literally, Kevin, at the time, there were 5,800 polling places in Michigan. and I won by 5,200. So I literally won by less than a vote per precinct. So it really impressed on me the importance of any number of things: working hard, shaking every last hand, and of course ballot security and things like that. So when I got hired by the RNC in the Trump campaign, I knew the difference this year in 2024 to represent them in federal court. It was personal to me.
How did that work? You were hired by the Trump campaign. I think they went across the country and hired teams of lawyers.
Yeah. So they hired a couple smart young guys here, and they brought me into the fold to go in the court. So
Were you the smart one or the young one?
I was the guy who'd been in court a lot of times before and would know where to stand in the courtroom.
There you
Whether
go.
that made me smart or whatever, but I've been through the drill a couple times.
So you went through being the attorney general. What were the highs and lows while you were attorney general?
It sounds silly, but so I love sports. I watch ESPN and every night and morning, and watched the game last night until I fell asleep. And they talk about athletes. Michael Jordan always remembers the losses more than he remembers the wins. I'm a little different. I don't, there were times during the 8 years when there was ups and downs through the course of the day, but by and large, every night when I went to bed, I felt good. So there wasn't a whole lot of lows. It was all highs in the sense of I was at a Lincoln Day a couple months ago, and a woman came up to me, and she was like 65. And she came up to me, and she had heard my speech, and she said, you should talk about child support, because you really changed the whole world of family courts around when you went after deadbeat parents and who could afford to pay and weren't. And that made my day, because part of being in public service, part of being a Marine, part of being a homicide prosecutor. Excuse me. I shouldn't have had that Red Robin chili, I guess. But part of being that person or in those positions is you get to help real people. And so they kind of reminded me that you have political battles, you have ups and downs, you have people throwing rocks at you, figuratively. But at the end of the day, it's a privilege and honor to be there. So a lot of great things is, we set up the first cold case unit ever in the AG's office. We set up the first mortgage fraud unit. During the Great Recession in 2008 and 2009, we helped put together, Governor Granholm was kind of a bystander. So I went to all the major mortgage servicers in the country, and we had fairs, and maybe some of your viewers remember these. We had fairs in Ford Field and the Delta Complex in Grand Rapids. I think they renamed it. And, the Ice Arena in Flint and in Saginaw. And we helped 56,000 people. Literally, it was like a job fair. People would come in and they had problems. We helped them get their mortgage, got them face to face with the servicer, and helped them get their mortgages renegotiated. So that was a highlight. Solving cold case. We convicted a serial killer, Coral Watt, who was being led out of Texas prison. We stood up for Jennifer Gratz, who sued the University of Michigan, went all the way up to U.S. Supreme Court, and when she was denied entrance into U of M because she was a white female from downriver Southgate Anderson High School, and she wasn't politically connected or favored. And I stood up against Jennifer Granholm and actually President Gerald Ford, and when help U of M, and ultimately I turned around and worked with Jennifer Gratz to get the Michigan Civil Rights Initiative, part of the Michigan Constitution, which said that you can't use race, gender, and all the other DEI topics in public contracting or in admissions decisions or employment, public employment. Now, of course,
They still do it.
well, they didn't when I was there. They didn't when Bill Schuette and Governor Snyder were there. I will grant you, the current AG, who has a chief DEI officer, if you can imagine how outrageous that is, and the governor and the Secretary of State use it, but they didn't. In fact, I believe you live in Oakland County, and there's estimates came out the last county exec race that millions of dollars are spent on DEI efforts in Oakland County. That didn't happen when I was there. In fact, the city of Grand Rapids, as well as city of Detroit, tried to sneak it by us, and we issued opinions. In fact, people can go to the AG's website and get my opinion on the Grand Rapids city government trying to impermissibly, violate the affirmative action ban, and we put a clamp down on it. There was a sheriff in town who was standing up for the people and for the Constitution then. There isn't now, but, I feel really good in 2027. We're going to have a clean sweep, a Senate majority. We'll have a new AG, and we'll have a new Secretary of State who are conservatives. And, of course, I feel really good about that. I'll be the governor working with that and building the team to move Michigan forward.
Time will tell. It's going to be a very, very competitive political landscape in Michigan. It's my belief anyway. And we'll see who comes out on top. So you were Attorney General, and then you ran for governor.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when Snyder was elected, correct?
Yeah, so it was a 5-way primary, and Governor Snyder had the most money. And he was the more moderate. So Mike Bouchard, Pete Hoekstra, Senator George, and I kind of diced up the conservative vote, and Governor Snyder won. And he spent $8 million of his own dollars, which was $8 million was a lot more then than it is now. And so he won, and I lost, and I cheered him on, and I think he moved the needle, and he should be applauded for that.
Yep. The ability to self-fund obviously helps. I mean, you're doing it this campaign for you put up money.
I put money in. I put $1 million in because it's kind of funny for the son of a union carpenter and a maid from Redford Township that seemed a little crazy to put $1 million in my race. I didn't, like I said, it's like the neighbors I grew up in Redford, they'd be hitting me in the head with a baseball bat thinking I was crazy.
I don't think there's anything to apologize about.
No, but I'm not apologizing. I'm just saying that the people I grew up with, how they view it. And because they were working people, and I've worked really hard, and that gets me on the ballot. I think it's important, even if I'm out there every day trying to raise money, shake hands, try and get votes. I think it's important when you run. So that you ask for people for their votes, you ask them to volunteer, and you ask them for their money to build the team, the coalition you need to win. And so I'm certainly asking people for their time and their efforts and their volunteer efforts, and I'm out there 7 days a week right now. And so I thought it was appropriate that before I ask anyone for money, that they know that I'm sacrificing myself in that regard. And so that's why I put $1 million in, which essentially guarantees I'm on the ballot, and then we get to next year.
Yeah. It's again, I think the ability to show that you're investing is an advantage, and I applaud you for doing it.
Yeah, I wish I had a lot more to invest.
Well, you probably got a few shackles, I suspect. So you lose in the governor's election, and
in the primary.
In the primary, right. I'm sorry. And you start...
I've never lost a general election. So first time I ran, I beat Gary Peters. I was outspent. There was also a Senate race at the time, a gubernatorial race, so I had to bring votes back. In 2006, which in 2008 were really hard Republican years nationally and here in Michigan. Because in 2006, we were starting to slide into the recession. The Iraq war was going on. And so the gubernatorial candidate lost and the Senate candidate lost. So again, I had to bring 300,000 people back. And those were primarily so many people who are now Trump voters, right? They were people that I grew up with that, got dirty at work every day, worked with their hands, were tradesmen like my dad or my uncles or my brother-in-law. And so I was able to connect with them and bring them back. So,
what
so
year
I lost a primary, but I've never lost a general.
That's great. I've only lost a primary. I've only lost a primary myself. Yeah. You lose the primary and you start your own law firm.
I did. I went to a big law firm for 6 months, and it really wasn't me. And so
What type of law did you practice at the time, Mike?
well, I was an ex-prosecutor and I never even did a civil case, right? I at the AG's office, I learned a lot from reviewing briefs and stuff like that. And we had a lot of training. When I got there, and you can imagine this from your business background, when I got there, Jennifer Granholm left the office with 44 divisions and one chief deputy. So you can imagine how long it took for any decision to be made, right? And every decision that impacted more than $20,000 had to go up to the front office. So I changed that. We folded that in. We created the AG, chief deputy, and maybe this is too nerdy for the viewers. And then we had 5 bureau chiefs, and then each of them had 5 or 6 divisions. And that really made things a lot more efficient. So I got some exposure to civil law because of that. But yeah, I was a babe in the woods, at age 48 or whatever I was. I had to start all over,
You were 48.
Yeah, 47 or 8, something like that. Yeah, it was 15
Yeah,
years
that's not
ago.
easy.
It
That's not easy
was,
to do.
Hey, dude, I was getting up off of my ass, and it was like I was back in Marine Corps boot camp, right? It was 16-hour days, out of the house before 7, run home, see my kids for sports, run back to the office. But it turned out okay.
So 6 months at a big firm, you don't like it, and you spin off.
I spin off, and I literally got an office in a suburban mall near my house. I wanted to because I knew I'd be working a lot of hours, so I wanted to be close to my home in Livonia. And so it's just me. And you were talking about Judge Duggan, who's a federal court judge. I remember one Friday night, I'd stepped till like 11:30 figuring out how to file something online in federal court. And it was a frustrating experience because I had no support staff to talk to, So it was really, I was the chief bottle washer, bartender,
Sure.
busboy, everything.
What type of law were you focused on?
Well, initially I did what's called commercial litigation. So it'd be like in your auto dealer world, right? It might be an auto dealer sues the OEM about whatever, a contract, right? Or it could just be, at that time, in 2011, 2012, 2013, we were having a lot of the fallout from the Great Recession right here in Michigan. So a lot of auto suppliers were suing each other.
Were you doing plaintiff or defense work? Or?
Well, it's not really plaintiff or defense work in the auto supply world. It's like whoever goes to court first is the plaintiff and the other. But it was fights over money. But when I was at Dyke McGossett, which is initially where I was, I wanted to write an op-ed about the Supreme Court. And I got complaints. And that's when I knew I had to leave after 6 months. Great firm, great people, but I didn't want to be...
I think my uncle worked there.
Yeah. So I wanted to be able to chart my own way. And so I went off on my own. So eventually I did those kind of commercial lawsuits or one business deal and proprietary customer list from another, that kind of stuff. But I got, over a couple of years, I got really into, I shouldn't say got, the nuns at St. Sabina would be hitting me over saying got. But I went into cases, I kind of gravitated toward cases where, folks were fighting with government, right? Over wetlands permits, zoning issues, and all kinds of issues. And so I ended up suing state government a lot. I sued big institutions on behalf of a number of seniors I sued over Medigap insurance, Blue Cross, right? But ultimately I gravitated into the world of sexual assault victims, which was great because I got to wear the white hat again. So I was in the tail end of Nassar. I wasn't too involved initially because my wife was in the House, and I didn't want to impact any of her votes.
Did Nassar come before your big lawsuit against? I think you sued the Army.
No, the University of Michigan.
No. I know
Yeah.
Nassar was University of Michigan, but wasn't there a lawsuit that you handled down at Camp Lejeune or one of the
No,
military camps?
Right. That's so when I was in the Marines, I was a rifleman, right?
Right.
And so we slept in the mud and haven't camped a whole lot since I got out of the Marines as a result. And so one of my duty stations, I was all over the world. I was in Puerto Rico. I was in Mount Fuji. I was in Korea. I was in Okinawa. So my unit was the 2nd Marine, 2nd Battalion out of Camp Lejeune. And so I trained, I was with them close to a year. And we did half that year in Okinawa, in Korea. The other half we were training in Camp Lejeune. And during that time, unbeknownst to any of us dumb 19, 20, 21-year-olds, we were being poisoned. There were 4 different poisons that had just dropped into the water, literally into the aquifers. Literally. So Marines are spit and polish, right? That's when we're not in the field, right? Dress blues, shiny brass, spit shine shoes. So of course, the laundromat was a big deal. And like they would just take the cleaning solution, walk out, and dump it right into the grass. And if you think about a laundromat at a facility of 20,000, 25,000 Marines, that's a lot of fluid. And it was going into the aquifers. They would take.
And you noticed that?
No. None of us knew that. It was covered up by some officials who dealt with environmental issues going back to the 70s for the Department of Navy. So long story short, that was discovered later on. And in 2022, the Camp Lejeune Justice Act was passed. And it created a 2-year window for anyone who had suffered during that time to bring a lawsuit against the malicious, abject, willful, and wanton conduct, unfortunately, of our Department of Defense, knowing that Marines and sailors, because a lot of sailors are there, corpsmen, and family members were being poisoned. So I represent 224 of those individuals.
How did you get 224 Marines or military people to find Mike Cox in Michigan?
Well, it's not too hard because I'm pretty well known in Marine circles, but it was word of mouth and advertising, both, just here in Michigan. So,
do you remain active with the Marines at all, or?
Well,
I mean, for a 19-year-old rifleman to be well known in Marine circles,
no, absolutely. So, we're a different breed, Kevin. All right. So
I'm familiar.
Let me answer your question. So, right. I could take off my shirt. I'll show you my very stupid, as my wife described, my Marine tattoo. Right. So, at age 19, the Marines meant so much, and no one got tattoos. And so I have a big eagle, globe, and anchor, USMC. And, except it's kind of funny because the C is shrunk. Right. So my wife says it's USMO because my arm isn't as big as it used to be. But Marines, it's a brotherhood, right?
Absolutely. All the military is.
Well, but not like the Marines. Okay. So they, the whole show, the idea on HBO, Band of Brothers, that was really stolen from us, right? There was a Marine Corps general who wrote about the Band of Brothers in Korea. And he was later my commanding general at Camp Lejeune. But at any rate, so we have this bond. So, when I got out of the Marines, I'm a prosecutor. There were so many cops that were Marines, right? When I was in office, every November 10th, most every November 10th, I'd have a speech for the Marine Corps birthday ball. My daughter, when I was in office, spent 13 months in Camp Fallujah during the worst of the Iraq War, 2004 and 5. She was an enlisted Marine. And so people know anything. And I used to team up with Drew and Mike, if you remember them, on WRF,
Yeah.
as well as Paul W. Smith. And so we would, at the time, no one really got the idea, like when folks, and I got it from my daughters and a lot of the people she served with before and after, you know, my daughter turned 21 in Camp Fallujah, right? And she had been on truck patrol. She wasn't in combat in theory, but she had people die all around her because she'd be on trucks, right? Or a couple times she was a communications person, or she was on helicopters going to another base. And so she wasn't combat arms, but she had people dying around. When they got back at the base, whether it's people like her or logistics or folks in the infantry, they'd have a lot of free time. And, you know, they couldn't go hang out at bars or whatever, what people would do. And so we sent over recreational gear. I worked with the Michigan Chamber of Commerce, WRF, WJR. We'd send over like treats, you know, that kind of stuff. So it's just a bond. It's not just with the Marines. A lot of the folks who were in the National Guard from Michigan then, that they were just my people.
How did that case work out? How was it settled?
Oh, well, that's ongoing right now.
It's still going.
Yes, yes. The one you may be confused on, I was the lead lawyer suing the University of Michigan.
No, I'm familiar. Yeah, with
Okay.
with Doctor. You know, it's funny because I think the MSU case seems to get more notoriety in the public, not right or wrong. Both of them are heinous. Both of them are bad deals. So you were the lead attorney, and you represented.
So my partner and I had 187 clients, right? But there was a total of 1,078 who were part of the settlement, and really hundreds more, because so most of the folks were.
It was a huge settlement, by the way.
It was
490 million.
490, yeah. And so it really started in 1966 was the first day Dr. Anderson reported September 1 in 1966 he oversaw all the physicians at University of Michigan Health Service and ultimately the whole athletic department. But he had been there earlier. In fact, former U of M Regent Ron Weiser said he was abused by him in 1963 because he was on the wrestling team. And so it was 3 decades of abuse. He was fired while I was a senior in high school on August 13th in 1979, if you can imagine that, and let back in the weekend later. It was, so we had this, I did depositions, uncovered a huge cover-up, and ultimately the University of Michigan settled.
Interesting. So he was fired in 79 and then brought back in.
Yeah. Oh, and then, so he fired in 79.
When was he finally terminated from?
He was never terminated. He retired after 37 years in 2003, and they lauded him. They had it.
When did the case start, Mike?
So it started in February of 2020.
Statute of limitations wouldn't apply?
No. For 100 years in Michigan. We didn't make any new law, Kevin. We didn't do anything special, but we used the law, right? And so Michigan has a statute called fraudulent concealment, all right? It's been around for 100 years. And it says if a defendant knows they've done wrong and hides evidence from the plaintiff, the statute of limitations is told. So no one knew, and he was a doctor doing it with a doctor's coat on. And he would tell people this is for, medicinal reasons. And I don't know that I want to get into graphic details here.
Yeah, not necessarily.
So at any rate, it was in the course of medical treatment. And like I said, even like a sophisticated regent at the University of Michigan didn't realize he was being abused when he was. And so ultimately, it all came out in February, I think it was February 20th of 2020. There was an internal report that University of Michigan had sat on for a year and a half, and it got leaked to the Detroit News, and from there we started investigating.
Congratulations, by the way. People like that obviously deserve to be punished. And I don't know where Anderson is, if he's in jail or if it was a financial
He's dead.
settlement.
He died in 2010.
He died.
Yeah,
So really, it was just a financial.
No, no. It was, if you were one of the 1,078, and so many of them were Michigan men, and so many of them were stars in their field. 70+% were varsity athletes at the University of Michigan. And they helped create the University of Michigan athletic department that we have now. In fact, in January of 1981, he got disciplined again for abusing a gay kid, a gay young man at the Health Services Center. So what'd they do? They parked him for 6 months, then they sent him full-time to the athletic department. And so could you imagine being a varsity athlete from 1981 on, and this guy was abusing you, and sometimes you didn't know because, like, and I don't want to get into details. And you live and die for the University of Michigan. You're a Michigan man. In fact, so many of my clients, because they didn't have NIL then, right? So many of my clients, they got an education and they love the University of Michigan, but so many of them walk around with limps and they're all messed up. And they're people our age in much worse shape because of, what they left on the football field or on the basketball court or on the wrestling mat. So no, it was not just financial. It mattered. You've been in business, so you know that, there are lawsuits and sometimes they're about money, a commercial deal, and other things like there might be a racial or sexual harassment case. It's about the money, but it's also the recognition that you're a human being and you were done wrong. So it wasn't just about the money.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that our institutions, either wantonly or unwantonly, most people know right from wrong, and most people are willing to question and validate right and question and validate wrong. And it's
well, I'll tell you, so the guy who fired him on August 13th of 1979 had 1,300 U of M employees under him. He wasn't some schlep, right?
Right.
He was number 4 in the org chart. And he went and told the number 3 guy. And then they brought him back the next week. So it went up to the highest reaches of the University of Michigan leadership for decades. And it really,
it's a failure.
It's a lesson. Yes.
Yeah, it's a failure. No different than Nassar at MSU.
Right.
It was a failure. And you scratch your head and you wonder why.
Right. Poor leadership, that's why.
Yeah.
The people not stepping up and doing the right thing, people not taking account for their team.
Yeah. And the decision-making process behind it. It's pretty crazy. What, Mike, a couple of things that I put out some notes about our conversation, and people responded to me, and they had some questions. And I think that there's always the question of when you have attorneys, you guys obviously make your living off of pursuing cases, settling cases, and whatnot. How do you respond to the people that are concerned? In this case, it sounds like a very noble cause.
Right.
And I suspect you were handsomely compensated. $490 million. You had just under 10% or
Kevin,
18%?
you're prying. I made several $1 million off of it.
Oh, I'm not prying.
I did not make a
I'm
third
not
of-
asking at
no,
all.
You,
These
you,
are
you really
people that
are,
are
and that's
asking.
okay. You
no,
really are.
I'm really asking for the people that ask.
Yeah.
And in a leadership role, how do those characteristics help or hurt as a governor?
Well, as a governor, a couple things, right? First and foremost, I ran 60% of the homicide prosecutions 25 years ago in all of Michigan. It's a high-stress job, right?
Mm-hmm.
14, 15 high-stress assistant prosecutors. All they do is murder every day. And you don't understand the stress of dealing with a murder and the family and having to be there to celebrate the verdict, and sometimes being there to be part of the sorrow and the tears after that. You don't understand the stress of hugging a young woman who was raped, and after a guilty verdict, or more importantly, after a not guilty verdict, because the investigation just didn't come up with enough. And so that was great training, right? And then I had 8 years as Attorney General, which I reduced the size of the office by 20%, did more. In fact, the caseloads went up 7-8%, and did a lot in new initiatives and increased gun rights and fought against affirmative action, things that the office never done before. Then, as an attorney, I had to start all over at age 48. You know, how many people start from scratch at age 48 and build a successful business? So I've been in the situation where I had $1 million into a case invested, and I pay my employees the 15th and 30th, and I had to make a payroll of $76,000 on the 15th, and I only have $3,000 on the 12th, like any other businessman does. So when you ask, well, how does the leadership there? Well, let me tell you, we had 63 different attorneys and 1,078 emotionally charged victims of sexual assault who were mostly men in their middle ages who can't cope with it. And so to bring that into a settlement takes a lot of talent. You have to build coalitions. Most of the attorneys aren't conservative Republicans. Most of them wouldn't vote for me. You know, they're Democrats. But I built a coalition. That's what you do. You know, that's what you do in government if you're going to get anything done. So the answer is really multifaceted.
Government obviously is very unique in how it operates. And you've had success within your roles within government. And I think that's...
And in business, okay? So let's start with this. I built a business from scratch, just with my effort, with my hands, and my ingenuity. And I've done well. And I did it at an advanced age, totally switching careers. So when you're governor, there are going to be things that come down the pike that you can't rely on, you know, what your dad did or your grandfather did. New challenges, and you're going to have to be resourceful. And so that's the training I've had, starting as a 19-year-old in the Marine Corps and all the way through right now.
Yeah, I think we all rely on what our dads did and our grandfathers did, but I never had that option. I bought my business myself and grew it. My brother was killed tragically, and I didn't want my father involved because that would have undermined my ability to run the business. So any implication that I was taken or given an easy path would be incorrect on your part.
I don't think I said that. I'm just saying. No, excuse me. I'm
no,
just
no,
saying.
Mike, you
are you going to cut
me.
me off?
I might. You've cut me off
Okay.
a couple times.
All
So
right. It's your show. Go ahead.
No, it's our show. And
No, it's your show. You get to ask the questions, and I'm sitting here because I will go anywhere and talk to anyone. But you and I both know this is a kind of odd situation where you're going to run for governor. And
I can't tell you that.
Well,
you don't know that.
I don't know that, but
I'm not making any announcements. Personally, I don't think campaigns, Mike, should extend for months and months. I think they're exhausting to the people of Michigan. I think that I would like to see campaigns limited to 12 months or 9 months or less, actually. Because
there's this pesky little thing called the First Amendment.
Oh, people can talk, but that's different than running a campaign.
You're talking right now. Donald Trump campaigned for 4 years, and thank God he did. And I'm not going to apologize for running now. That's ridiculous. I'm going to apologize for hard work. I'm going out to meet regular folks.
I'm not asking you to apologize, okay, Mike, and I think that it's great that you go out. I'm simply saying, as a declared candidate, I disagree that we should allow that. Doesn't mean you can't be out working. And Donald Trump declared for the presidency, I think 12 months before the presidential election.
It was November of 2022.
Well,
That was a full 2 years, and he was at it before then.
yeah, I go out and talk to people as well. And it's just,
Here's how I view it. I'm out every day meeting different people and hearing different stories, and different businesses and just regular folks on the street being impacted. I just struck up a conversation in Perry on the way here with a young woman who worked in the gas station about, she was talking about her job with the guy in front of me, and I said, "Oh, how long you been here? And what do you worry about?" and that kind of thing. And I learn a lot. So I'm glad I'm out every day. People get to come quiz me and ask me questions, and I think that's what Republican government's all about.
well, I think that's great. I do the same thing. I talk to people every day, and it's fulfilling and it's stimulating because they have different views.
They do.
Over the years, how have your political positions changed? Your thoughts, your ideas, what you believe in?
I'm not sure I know what you're asking.
I-
I mean, like I told you, in 1988, I was voting Democrat before I saw George Dukakis wearing that helmet, riding the tank in Warren. And I said, I'm just out of the Marines 5 years. I can't vote for that guy to be the leader of the free world. And over the process, John Engler made me fully confirmed as a Republican by what he did by 1994. And like I said, when I was a homicide prosecutor, I come from an Irish Catholic immigrant background. Both my parents are immigrants, and my mom was a maid. She had a funny accent, so she got jobs as a maid. People liked a maid with a funny accent. My dad was a carpenter, and so we were working class, and so we were with Democrats, but with time and experience, we became Republicans. So I've changed probably like a lot of folks have changed.
There was a great writing, I forgot who wrote it, about when you're young and you're idealistic, you're a Democrat, and when you start to gain responsibility, maybe you remember who wrote it. It was a great letter that I remember reading as a kid.
Yeah, it was Winston Churchill. He talked about when you're young, if you're not a socialist, you have no heart. When you're 40, if you're not a conservative, you have no brain, right? So it's people have taken off that.
Maybe
that
it was Paul
Churchill.
Harvey that did something
Yeah.
similar or whatnot. But,
It's like writing in politics. People stole Churchill's line and changed it to their own use.
Yeah. So your policies, what are your primary policies
Sure.
that you want to talk about?
So in 2010, we had many of the same problems. Our economy was going in the tank. Our education achievement was falling behind other states, not nearly as bad as now. And we were losing young people. And everywhere I go in Michigan, it's the economy, education, and we're losing our kids, right? And so on the economy, I have two ideas. One started really back in 2010. I proposed then what was called a $2 billion tax cut, primarily a personal tax cut, meaning what I call the tax on work.
What is that? I've heard you say that, and I don't know what it is.
Well, the tax on work is, so I grew up, my parents were legal immigrants. My dad, in fact, got drafted and sent to Korea 6 months after he got here. But they were all about working, right? When my mom would smoke a cigarette with her friends, having highballs in the garage, summer parties. The highest compliment you could give anyone, say, that's a worker, whether it's a he or she. And so the tax on work is the income tax, right? Because that's what we're taxing. And yet we say work, we teach our kids about the value of work, and we try and instill a work ethic as people are young, but we tax that first. So number one be eliminate the state income tax.
100%.
Yes. There are 10 states, big and small. So east and west, so north and south. So you have New Hampshire, and then you have Texas, you have Florida, then you have Washington, which is a Democrat state that's gotten rid of it. Then you have Tennessee, and then you have South Dakota. And so 10 states, we've already seen the method, right, that it's worked. And Mississippi has passed it recently. I know because my oldest daughter moved to Mississippi, and Oklahoma is in the process of phasing it
Yeah,
out.
there were 9 that it's implemented in.
Yeah,
and 2
I think
that
it's
are
10
adding
fully, and then 2 are in a phase. Now that can change, right?
Sure.
Because that's certainly what happened here in Michigan, at least. Yeah. As I think you pointed out, a lot of people pointed out, we're the only state in the country the past 5 years that went back to increase the income tax
We're the only state in the country this year that increased income tax on its residents.
Yeah, so that's number one, and for a variety of reasons, right? So first and foremost, it puts more money in the pocket of every person who works. Number two, it sends a signal to our young people that this is a place to stay or could be a place to stay. Number three, it impacts small businesses, many of whom are S corps, and so they're taxed at the same rate as the state income tax. It is, and quite frankly, empirically, we know that states that have embraced it thus far have greater job creation rates than Michigan. Yep. Have higher income, per capita income growth than Michigan, and certainly increased population. They're magnets. Number two is I would reenact right to work.
How do you do that?
Through the legislature.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't need to change the Constitution.
A governor can't simply say, we're going to reenact right to work.
Right. So, but whoever wins the governor's seat, I expect their party's going to control the House and Senate. And so what that does is it sends a message to job creators all across the country that Michigan's open for business. If you talk to commercial industrial developers, during the 3 or so years that we had full right to work, we were attracting new businesses to Michigan, right?
Yep, pretty interesting.
Because it's really, and the interesting thing is, so I'm from a complete union background. I have 3 uncles and 1 aunt who were UAW, right? Just working folks like my mom and dad. My brother-in-law, in about an hour, will be going to build F-150s at Dearborn Truck. He's in the UAW. And the thing about right to work, it only empowers workers. It doesn't really punish unions. But
union membership when Michigan had right to work actually increased slightly.
Well, I think a couple of the public service ones that went down. But
overall, in the state, union membership numbers went up just slightly.
I'm not aware of that, but be that as it may, it has a primary thing of letting the rest of the world know that we're open for business. So number 3 is, and really related, is we have to doge Michigan state government. Like I said earlier, other than Terry Lindland, I'm the only politician I know of, or elected official, or whatever term you want to use, winning candidate, I kind of like that term, who actually reduced the size of their office, so really did more with less. And yet we have this crazy phenomena going on. So Governor Whitmer, when she comes in the office, the state budget's about $58.6 billion. We have about 51,000 full-time employees. She's seeking to move that number up to 57,200 in the current budget. And that's in addition, if you talk to anyone in state government offices, they've added a ton of part-time people. And
well, they're trying to show that employment is growing.
Yeah.
And really, it's just government employment.
Yeah, exactly.
The private sector has continued to shrink.
It's the old Bill Parcells line, you are what your record says you are. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics under Biden and now Trump show us that we're now number 2 in unemployment in the country. So those 2 economic ideas, in terms of eliminate the the tax on work, reenact right to work, Doge Michigan government. And the Doge Michigan government is more than head counts, though that's part of it. I'd of course bring all state workers back to work. You know, about 9-10% of Michigan private sector employees have the right to remote, but it's 60% of state employees. That's an inequity, right? You should be able to find public employees in a public building that you're paying for with your taxes. What else does it mean? It means speeding up the permit process. It means reducing regulation. I've never laid off an employee during my time as a lawyer. You know, there's sometimes you reach agreement. You know, lawyers want to go somewhere else, or isn't what they expected, or the worker isn't what you expected, colleague, paralegal, and so you reach an agreement, help them find a new job. So I never laid anyone off, but I've been audited by the unemployment agency. Isn't that crazy? And it costs me a ton of time and money. And it's really, so I felt firsthand kind of the harassment of the regulator. And so Michigan is overtaxed and overregulated. And so part of Dogeing state government is looking at those. As I told you earlier, I worked in 2006 to get an affirmative action ban in the Constitution. It was successful, and I later on defended it in federal court. And Bill Schuette, to his credit, carried it on, and we ultimately won in 2014. In this day and age, when our fourth graders, only 2 states read at a lower level, New Mexico and Alaska. People say we're tied at 44th.
Actually, we're trading at 47 or 48.
48 is the real number, right?
Yeah.
And if you think about it, Kevin, that's really the canary in the coal mine. Directionally, that tells us where our educational system is going. And the flip side of that is my granddaughters, and this is the reason I'm running, is my granddaughters in Hernando, Mississippi. My parents came here, and they're still alive, because Michigan was the greatest state to be in America. And in the course of their lifetime, their granddaughter got a better job in Mississippi, a less regulated state, and their great-granddaughters, my granddaughters, get a better education in Hernando, Mississippi than in Livonia, Michigan, where I live. And that is just a moral shame, and that needs to be fixed. So how do we do that? Well, there's a lot of things, right? First and foremost, more parental choice. Universal school choice. 13 states have done it, improved achievement. We have a constitutional provision that prevents public money going to private schools. So we would have almost universal school choice. What else do we do? Well, Governor Snyder, one of the great things he did was require grading schools. If we're going to be transparent with parents, they ought to know how their school is doing, not just for their kids' grade, but for all, whether it's all 6 grades of elementary, or all 3 of middle school, or all 3 of high school, or 4, depending on the system you're in. And it's like, I don't have my phone with me because we're live here, but like, we're in Owasso, and you or I could order an Uber to go someplace. We go down to Perry or go to Lansing, and we get on the Uber, and we could look at it, and we would know the driver's name, what kind of car they had, their license, how many trips they've had on Uber, and when they were going to arrive. And they'd know the same thing. They would know about our rating and whether we were a jerk or good tipper or whatever. And so we can do that to get a ride. But we can't have more transparency for parents where they can see every week what's going on in their school, whether it's truancy, grades, things like that. I mean, drop down, we've had drop down software for 40 years, and parents can't see, like, in real time, more things are going on with their school. Another thing we need to do is we need to recognize where Michigan is at. So we were talking about the GI Bill earlier, right? So that really started after World War II, and it gave people opportunity to buy a house with some mortgage assistance or guarantee, or to go to college or school or a trade school. And so after now 70 years of that, in Michigan, about 32% of all our adults have a 4-year degree or more. The other 68% have a mix. They're a trade, they're a technician, they have associate's degree. So we should start revamping to allow kids as they're in junior high and high school to explore trades and other things,
We used to.
CTE education. To your point, we used to have shops, right?
Yep.
And allow them the flexibility to start preparing for their career, whatever it is, as a plumber or as a automotive tech or whatever, and make them more job ready. We can do that. Other states are doing it. In Ireland, where my cousin's kids go, they do that now. Europe, I hate to say it, is ahead of us on that. But we can do it. About 15% of the state students have some opportunity for that. We need to expand that. So it's really about a freedom and prosperity agenda, and freedom involves more choices, more transparency, more education. So
You think
that's
you'll
the
be
other
able
piece.
to get the teachers union to agree with you on that one?
Look, they're by hook or crook, right? It's like the governor has an awful lot of power, and it just
How
has
far are
to
you
be
willing to go
meaning what?
with the teachers unions or with funding of the Department of Education in Michigan or local school districts?
So that's about 4 different questions or topics that probably take us the next 3 hours. But it is about
condensed version.
Yeah. It's really about policy and then the will to execute it, right? And so I know how to run a state government department. I know how to run a successful business. The lessons like I learned from being a 19-year-old squad leader in the Marines, it's really employing that. It's a mixture of the carrot and stick, which is what Governor Snyder used. And here's the reality. Most teachers get into teaching because they want to do right by kids. And yet we beat them down. I'll give you an example. I have a friend who's just retired from Livonia Public Schools. And over Christmas, she came up to me and she said, Mike, I've had it, right? And she was a department head at her high school. And she said, I can't take it anymore. When I tell a kid they have a paper due on Wednesday, he or she doesn't have to turn it into Friday. And I can't mark them down during that time. And then,
And that's her choice, or that's the
no, that's the
teachers
policy.
union?
No, that's not that. It's the union / administration, right? And this is where I'm going. So an adjoining district, Westland, I was telling a friend of mine who teaches in Westland, and she's a conscientious person. She can't retire yet, so she can't retire like my other friend. So, and she's a Democrat, right? And she told me, when I told her this story about this Livonia high school, she said, I can top that, Mike. I'm like, what? You can top that? I don't want that topped, right? That, to me, that's really foreign to the whole idea of merit, right? And how we move kids ahead. She said, now in Westland Public Schools, the policy is if a kid doesn't turn in the paper, it used to be you get a 0. Now you get a 50. And the reason for that is, I'm a lawyer because I'm not great at math, right? But I do know if a kid gets a 70%, then they can move them along. So it's social promotion by a different name. There in some school districts, the HR people have Me Too agreements, meaning they get whatever raise and benefits the teachers union they're supposedly negotiating against. So there are a lot of carrots and a lot of sticks that a smart, disciplined governor can use if he builds the team with the legislature. I think Governor Snyder showed us some of that, but I think there's more that can be done and will be done after January 1 of 2027 when I'm there.
Mike, I want to thank you. We didn't get a chance to go into all the questions, but it was certainly a good go, and I appreciate you taking the time. Would love to have you back on and finish up on issues that I think people in Michigan are interested in, right, and actually talking about the execution of it. But how would you like to have people get a hold of you?
Well, first and foremost, anyone who's watched or listened, I encourage you to go to Mike Cox 2026, MikeCox 2026.com to see the issues that I'm running on and some of the answers that will move Michigan forward. I also encourage you to sign up there and become part of the team to revolutionize Michigan. Lord knows we need to make Michigan great again. We need to make Michigan that state that my parents came to and make it, we need to get up and get out there and compete. And with your help, we will. So thank you very, very much. And keep in mind, if you want to win in 2026, go with Mike Cox. I've won 2 tough statewide races, and I'll fight for you each and every day, whether you vote for me or not. Thank you very much. And thank you, Kevin.
Want to thank Mike for being here today, and want to offer to the other announced candidates and those that have not announced, you are invited to come on to Beyond the Echo and tell people about what your beliefs are and how you will help Michigan in the 26th election. And I thank you for your time and look forward to talking to you again soon on another episode of Beyond the Echo. Thanks for tuning in to Beyond the Echo. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe so you never miss an update. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop us a comment and share the podcast with your friends. Stay connected and keep the conversation going by following us on social media. Until next time, keep exploring Beyond the Echo.